When I was little, I wanted to be retired by 40 and a pilot. None of those things have come to fruition. My name is Marque and I'm a chef. Cooking when I was small was just part of home life. You know, mum worked, dad was a long-distance truck driver, we never saw him. So I have all these basic recipes that I made when I was a kid. You know, I could put a roast on and I could make mashed potato and put the vegetables on and do all this sort of stuff. So cooking wasn't a thing back then, you know, it's just called living. Mum and Dad decided when I was 16 that they would move to basically a T-junction at the end of the Nullarbor in Western Australia, which is called Norseman. Right in the Outback, it's about 1,000 people and completely dominated by a gold mine. I finished school, finished my final year, and I worked in the mines, and I remember being completely freaked out. You know, I'm 17 years old and I'm stuck at the bottom of this big, huge skip down about 4,500 feet. I remember just sitting there sort of like crouched down on like this miner's knees because I was so cramped up. The miner's knees are on either side of my head. I'm just sort of sitting there just looking with my miner's hat on. Yeah, that was, I didn't like it that much. By the time I'm then 21, I said, look, I'm just out of here. So the Indian Pacific, which is a big train that goes from Perth to Sydney, had my bag, my guitar, got on the train, parents crying on the platform, and then just set off and went to Sydney, and I never ever went back. What I achieved was what a lot of people want to achieve with their lives. Their job sucks, they want to do something completely different, and I said, well, I'm going to train as a chef. I was just thrown onto a section, and it was just like this epiphany, you know, it's just this moment, you know, I just went boom, that was it. You know, it's just the buzz of service, the rush, the shouting, the smells, the, you know, completely different world to what I was used to, and I just thought this is a revelation for me. I'd worked at the bistro for nearly 5 years, and I entered an award and won it, the Josephine Pignolet Award for Best Young Chef. That was a huge turning point and sort of really put me on the map. I was married by this time to my wife Valerie, and I said, you know what, why don't we open our own place? So we scraped together whatever money we could, and we got into a space and opened the bistro. We were completely naive. We actually had no idea what we were doing whatsoever. Made a lot of mistakes. I started to feel that I had a lot of ideas and very creative, but no technical ability to achieve them or realise those ideas. And I started to read a lot more. I was buying these French books, and we decided we need to go to Paris, we need to do this, and so we sold the business and rented out our apartment and booked a ticket for Paris. I picked up a guidebook and Alain Passard, he'd just received his 3rd star, and I said, let's go for lunch. So we went and had the business lunch, and this was like my second culinary epiphany. I just couldn't believe it. The service, the food, the whole atmosphere, you know. He let me into the kitchen, and I worked there for 4.5 months, and it was just incredible. Like a boot camp for chefs in terms of that sort of intense focus on detail. But after working in the restaurant for nothing, we were basically running out of money, and Valerie just goes, let's go home, mate. So that was it. When we came back to Sydney, we wanted to, I guess, put everything into practice. So I opened Marque in 1999. Marque is a progressive restaurant. It's unique in that it's quite minimalist, as you see, and even in the decor. I like to think the food is an expression of myself and my personality, and as is the entire restaurant. What I admire is basically peasant cuisine. These dishes came from necessity rather than invention. It's that type of aesthetic, you know, that continues to inform me. I think that's where my minimalism comes from. If I can put one ingredient on a plate, I'll do it. And the more experienced I get, the more minimalist I get. So it's about understanding when you need to act and when you don't. In the kitchen, we have a lot of sort of small philosophies which inform the cuisine. If something doesn't really have a practical purpose, it doesn't exist. There's no garnish. There's nothing, there's no fancy, there's no trick. If I don't see any sense to it and I'll ask a question of that ingredient, if you can't answer it rationally, well, it's gone. It's about supporting the local ingredients, the best produce, and basically amplifying it or sort of unlocking the secret. I force myself to come up with things that are going to value add that product. If you put all the effort into growing a pig, I make sure that I use absolutely everything from nose to tail. I just think that that's a more sustainable, and I guess it's a bit more of a moral approach to things. I do feel for the fact that maybe that pig is 20 years old, and so it needs to be like almost a noble sacrifice. 4 years ago, we started Pay Modern, which is under the Sofitel in Melbourne. And we also opened that up in the Four Seasons in Sydney, which has been pretty successful. And I never sit back and rest on my laurels and say, okay, we've nailed it now, just let it roll out. It's not like that. I mean, things keep moving all the time. The culture around you, young people, it's a very competitive field, and there's always something to do. You know, we have to rationalise that it's a lifestyle choice, not actually a job, because it is, you know, it is all-encompassing. I've always been quite creative, and so I like reading books on photography and fashion, architecture. Photography is a bit, you know, it's a bit like cooking in terms of, you know, you have your raw ingredient and then you're just fascinated through the transformation. I've been photographing since probably I was 18. I've got a collection of medium format Mamiya cameras and things like that I love, and I like the mechanics of it as well, the craft and the art of it, and everything just sort of blends together. I like to try and tell a story. I like my photographs to be real and gritty. I have a lot of access to, you know, chefs. I enjoy when I'm on these symposia, and they're a bit disarmed because it's more social, and I ask them to take a portrait and think, yeah, sure, but you know, I think I get more true representation this than the media face. And again, visually, you know, I look at plates. I mean, it's like a portrait. It's about composition, using your eye and combinations of colour and shape and texture, and okay, this has to be delicious. You have to be wanting more, but then the conceptual elements come to it. I mean, it's a version of reality.